Have you ever wondered if there's a community out there that optimizes the living hell out of Stellaris and plays it on a near competitive level, and with 30 plus players in a match every week, then I would say, what a specific thing to ask! But yes, such community exists, and in a way it's like Stellaris Space Battle Royale, where you spend about 8 or 9 hours straight until a clear winner in the galactic race to conquering the galaxy emerges. This creates the perfect testing ground for many best of the best strategies that make your average, unfair exploit builds look like you started playing yesterday. All of these builds come to you with the courtesy of, hands down, one of the very best players of Stellaris multiplayer, as seen with his regular performance in WSC main events Automaton. Me and him took some time to build up some strats for your next competitive or friendly game if you want to be that min-maxing guy in Stellaris and laughing at timestamp crisis, with your main endgame crisis actually being what your CPU can take. If you have any questions about these builds, feel free to ask them at the comments section or send me a message. So if you're looking for a build to pick up to optimize your methods of purging Xenos or befriending them, or just wondering, hey, what are the people in multiplayer are using, what is the meta, you've come to the right place. Check out the timestamps in the description for the specific builds that you're looking for. The way it is going to be, we're going to have a picture of an example build. Generally the ethics and everything are not very interchangeable because they tend to be an internal part. Traits, on the other hand, are a bit more flexible. Some of the species don't even have the traits, but just whatever complements your playstyle or makes that build a bit more well-rounded, so I left a little bit of wiggle room for you to make the build your own. Without further ado, first build that we have is Syncretic Slavers. Here's the image. In this build, so this is an interesting build. In this build, your goal is to use the chattel, I don't know how to pronounce it right, chattel slavery mechanic to apply the bonuses you get from the slaves and workers to your specialists, because chattel slave pops are able to occupy specialist jobs. For those who do not know, chattel slaver is the type of slavery that does exactly what I just said. And as such, they become more considerably productive than your normal pops because the bonuses they get as slaves, which also apply to your specialists, which means you get a much better research per pop, you get much better alloy production, much better consumer good production. For this, what you need is set up your race as it is shown in the image and then expand aggressively. You will want to colonize as many planets as you can, just, go military, expand in mid-game, make sure you go for synthetic ascension for the maximum benefit, because what that allows you to do is to have the highest population growth possible in the game if you pull it off right. And by that I mean, before you finish the synthetic ascension, you need to have a few colony ships with your cyborg pops, or you can just import some of the organic populations, because all of your populations will become robots and will now be assembled. This strategy is a little slower, but the ramp up is worth it thanks to the traits on your slave species and your main species as well. I will be showing that in the picture. Do call me out if I forget about it. The next build we have is my personal favorite, is the Expansionist Megacorp. Here's an example of that build. This build is an early ramp build that takes advantage of the On the Shoulders of Giants origin early minor artifact bonus. So what minor artifacts do is you're able to sell them for 500 energy flat, but also you can spend 2 of them, and if you have a specific ethic, you're able to take advantage of it. In the case of Xenophobe, you're able to increase your influence, which is the main thing that stops you from building more space stations. So this will allow you to expand fast and race for those systems with the planets. Unfortunately, just like any ramp build, at the very beginning you will be very vulnerable. So if you are dealing with rushers, you might want to modify it a bit and play more defensively. But the important thing here is the private prospectors trait. You can get the second cheapest colony ships in the game thanks to this trait, and those will also be already paid for because they cost 500 energy. Selling a minor artifact is 500 energy, which means you're basically getting that colony ship for free. So as soon as you start excavating those, which I suggest doing so as soon as your first scientist reaches level 3. So as soon as you start excavating those, and those are very fast excavations because at every chapter you gain additional clues, you will be basically getting colony ships in disguise. With the bonuses to Unity and Science from your ethics, you should have no problem keeping up with any other origin, even though you will be coming from behind in most cases. You will have the most pops, but because you also have the most amount of planets, a lot of those pops are not going to be very productive. Colonists do not produce nearly as much as like a lot of other pops, so your planets are not going to be specialized. By year 20, you should have multiple planets producing on the levels of your opponents, but with a considerably better ramp potential because, like, with this build, I'm consistently able to get much more pops than Prosperous Unification, which starts with 4 more pops. As soon as all the planets in your vicinity are colonized, you may look into reforming your government into a technocracy to double down on quality over quantity bonuses of your civilization. So at the start you go with quantity and then you switch to quality, while enjoying the tremendous population growth and the fast expansion because you have colonized so many planets. There is a variation of this build I should mention using Terrawars or just Lithoids, but the disadvantage here is the habitability reduction upon colonization, making it less desirable unless you would like to use the pop-by exploit, which is banned in most multiplayer levels. So the way this exploit works, you colonize a planet. In the case of Terrawars, just, slam your meteor in that planet using 500 minerals, and migrate, resettle all of your pops from that planet back to your capital. That way you will be able to colonize it again. This exploit was fixed in the before the rework, that if you did move all of your pops, the planet would still be yours and you would still pay the sprawl penalty. But now that's no longer the case, allowing this exploit to come back. Due to its versatility and the economic influence which you get from cashing in minor artifacts, this is currently my go-to build. But then again, that's just me. I'm not the best player by any means. So the other very popular build is the Corporate Ringworld. This was one of the first order strategies that people came up with when the Federations was first released. The idea is simple. You clear the blockers that will let you build trade sections and science sections. Why? Because this way you can have about 500 science by the year 10. However, you will be losing a lot of energy or consumer products, so what you have to do is balance out the expense using the trade value bonuses that Megacorps get. Additional benefit of this build is that it lends itself great for diplomacy. You can just mix it up by unlocking Federations early and get friendly with someone, which will be easy because everyone wants those sweet, sweet branch offices. In fact, even on competitive games, I had people pay me all the costs of a branch office just so I would build one on their capital. Your goal is to first build the trade section, then the science section, using the rest of your pops and economy into stabilizing the state and then doing this again, at which point you will be so ahead that nothing should stop you. Rest of your planets or buildings can do your alloy or whatever like specialized production that you would like to do. So I don't really have a specific build order outside of the branches, I mean the sections on your Ringworld, but the idea is kind of allocate some of the pops, and as soon as the section is built, you make sure not all of them become scientists, because that will completely plummet your consumer goods economy while skyrocketing your science. Generally, you want at least half of them filled, and as your economy stabilizes, you'll be improving it. When you go to your policy section, make sure you select your trade policy the one that turns your trade value into consumer goods. That way you'll be able to support even more scientists, pushing you even further ahead in science, just turning you into an unstoppable juggernaut by like year 40. Naturally, you'll still be colonizing and everything, but Ringworld is going to be where you're going to be sending all your pops to fill everything up. Idea, energy, consumer goods, and science. That's basically the idea. Next, let's talk about making all the space friends. Here's an example build. So this strategy is going for the people who want to win the game with the power of friendship. It's quite simple. You build like normal and try to build a federation early. You sign migration treaties with people and basically steal their population growth. You may want to go with Megacorp on this one as to give an extrinsic reason for people to be friends with you. If you also get the Federation founding early, you can have your friends come to your defense. Later on, you can take the xenocompatibility to boost your population growth even further at the cost of creating unspeakable abominations that will fill your species tab to full. The main drawback of this build is that for some reason your neighbors do not want to be friends. You might be stuck and get swarmed by your enemies who have been building for war. As soon as this build gets rolling, it's very hard to stop because you are using the power of jolly cooperation. Especially in an RP game, you can delay building a federation, and the federation is generally there to protect you from the hostile and aggressive elements in an RP game. It tends to be a lot harder to declare a war depending on what type of people you're playing with. So if you know you're kind of safe until you get second tradition tree. So in the other side of the spectrum, we have a Doomsday Rush. Let's take a look. So preferably you will want to get this one with barbaric Despoilers. So we all thought that Doomsday was supposed to be for some self-challenge and for some, a self-challenging build, and not exactly a best possible min-maxing strategy, thanks to how hard the resource production and initial resources, are given. Well, it's not supposed to be a min-maxing strategy from the first look, but because of the way it is set up, because the bonuses you get, this build is theoretically obscenely powerful. First, you have to embrace your aggressive nature with the barbaric Despoilers and preferably Technocracy. I'm not sure if you're able to go with both, but barbaric Despoilers does need 1 or 2 worlds to not be horrible, and since Doomsday start eliminates your guaranteed worlds, that makes it a bit of a roll of a dice. And the idea here is that you expand aggressively. The barbaric Despoilers just give you a lot of small synergies. Initially, you expand aggressively with the extra influence boost of your xenophobe and ally production boosts from your main planet. You start with science labs on your capital, though most builds needs just a few. You might want to switch those into the alloy foundries because after you got some of the ship weapons, you will want to create more ships to double down on your bonuses. For the first 10 years, your priority is finding a decent planet and getting the right techs. Your first colonies need to specialize quickly, a little more quickly than your other builds, where you can build, your first building will be robots and everything. Here, you specialize them immediately. If that planet is going to produce consumer goods, the first building is consumer goods, where you focus on growth, pop growth buildings and everything. Here it does not matter because your goal is to find your nearest opponent and brutally take over their planets. By around year 15-20, you will want to push for alloy production and prepare for war. One strange thing you do is save up your unity and go into the supremacy tree. So you can say, for those who do not know, you do not lose any unity when you do not immediately buy your tradition. So just save up for it, and by year 22, go into supremacy, and by the year 22 or so, you should have enough fleets to challenge your neighbors very easily, thanks to the bonuses you get, even on the same amount of ships. Because of your supremacy, because of your barbaric Despoilers, you should have those bonuses, and because of your superior alloy production, yeah, you will be steamrolling them. After finishing Supremacy, you will want to go and build a Martial Alliance for the ship construction bonuses, which will be the main advantage you will have in the mid-game. So after your kind of early game rush wears off and you have conquered at least one or two of your neighbors, Martial Alliance, you need to be... so in order to pull this build off, however, I'm going to give you one caveat. You need to be 100% confident in your knowledge of how the war works. But this build is a high-risk, high-reward build that is a hidden gem, as we are theorizing. We have not tested this yet, but on paper it looks really good. So let's talk about a more balanced, less dice-rolly thing because of the guaranteed planets. Prosperous growth. At first, most people considered this build to be the default. As such, the build and origin was going to be the one that was measured against. Like, if you're making a build, everybody would be asking, hey, how does this fare up against the prosperous growth? This one would be the default meta. Turns out, the initial advantage you get from it, namely 4 pops and 2 districts, allows you to specialize your homeworld much sooner. As in, the first building you construct can be Science Lab or Alloy Foundry if you're specializing in alloys, and you can start turning some of your non-specialist buildings into those buildings because you have the production. The preferred way to go with this build is to build those science buildings first, Science Labs first, and then spec into consumer benefits in your economic policy for the extra consumer goods to fuel your scientist population. During this time, you can turn your Alloy Foundry into Science Lab when you are, and when you are out of building spots, do not worry. You still have 5 alloy production as a base, even if you do not have an Alloy Foundry. Personally, I prefer this conversion after 10 pops on my first colony to be more versatile, but now, due to this lack of alloys and overabundance of tech, you are playing the long game. This is kind of a more specialized towards a later game, but you can also do this with alloys. Like, just replace the science buildings with alloys and you're basically at the same situation. You colonize and expand normally and generally faster than usual thanks to your early boost. That boost cannot be understated, because it starts from the very beginning and they're already producing. So you can have the pops, but if they're all employed at very bad jobs, they're not going to be very productive. They're already employed at decent jobs. Then instead of looking for targets, if you're going with science, instead of looking for targets to invade, you try to get hangar-based technology for your space stations. And the reason for that is you're weakest at the early game. A lot of these builds are generally pretty weaker at the early game and they begin to shine later. This one is a little bit stronger, can go a little bit more mid-road, and can be a lot stronger than the rest. It's very versatile. But the way the science one is set up as Automaton played it, are weakest at the early game, which is about first 25-50 years. However, hangar bays are hard counter to the enemy corvettes. As such, in the event that you are declared war on, you will be able to fend off your enemy with a minimal fleet at your defensive starbase. Automaton has demonstrated the strength of this build a few times. After beating back 2 invasions, he managed to pull ahead in terms of tech, and from his attacking fleet in the form of cruisers, which are the most adaptive and generally most cost-effective ships. Few caveats in this ranking. These were all the builds we had, so I'm just adding a few caveats. All of these builds are viable in multiplayer PvP games. As such, WSC main events and have been crafted with those in mind. So these do not include the builds that are banned. For example, total war races are generally banned. The origins that create AI are generally banned. I'm definitely forgetting some other good builds. There are probably a lot of them out there, and just because your preferred build is not here does not mean it's bad or it's not competitive. Builds such as 3 of Life, Hive Mind are definitely valid and strong builds. However, I have not received enough input in those builds, and as I get more information, I'll be happy to expand this list. Success of these builds hinges on two things: understanding of economy and scaling that economy. It is a constant process that is a topic of another video. The other thing is the space combat. You need to know what is strong against what. Even if you have thousands of hours, it is common to not have up-to-date information in the combat builds. The fact that while corvettes very high evasion, medium-sized weapons with high tracking are effective against them, as well as hangar bays, which is the best way to counter the corvette spam. How to equip your ships and what is the best one changes sadly from patch to patch. I myself would not consider myself an expert in these, but I hope these builds help you to, like, if you would like to play some more Stellaris multiplayer, can help you build up and give you some ideas. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd like to thank WSC community and Automaton in particular for helping me with gathering this information, and I'll see you next time.